Let's talk a little bit more about who we humans who are participants on the show Survivor happen to be. As with any walk of life, we who number over 600 at this point span a wide spectrum of personalities and problems and ways in which we engage the world and one another. I think it's part of the beauty of Survivor that you watch and see with whom you feel some sort of bond or are repelled by. I have some experience with that. Mostly in a good way. People tell me they loved to hate me. And, I'll take that as a compliment. But anyway, those of us who participate in the show agree to be ourselves and agree without limits to being exposed not just as who we are, but in whatever ways the producers want to portray us. I'm not sure how many viewers actually know that. It might be interesting for me to share parts of the contract at some point. I think you'd be fascinated. The thing is huge, enormous. I don't know, 50 pages, maybe more. But it is incontrovertibly clear that producers can depict us in whatever ways they want to. Oh, but wait, is Survivor real? Yeah, Survivor's real, but those condensed versions of ourselves, so for example, I'm branded forever as the naked guy, because I was naked on Survivor, often. So were many people in that first season. But I was literally the only one in the entire season shown naked, because producers didn't know how the audience, America, was going to take that. Never mind this big, hairy gay guy who's running around naked all the time. It turned out to be a boon for them. It turned out to be something interesting to add to that water cooler talk each week. And I was very comfortable with my reasons for having done so, my understanding of who I am as a person, that I dealt with the aftermath relatively well. I learned a lot about America that I didn't know, and that's a whole other video that I can do. But from the perspective of who we are as participants and who the producers are able to portray us, you viewers should think of us as everyone you know across a spectrum. And what you see of us as we're exposed on the show often are only pieces. Those pieces are portrayed in order for you to understand as accurately as possible, I think is mostly their goal, how the season unfolded and what interactions took place in order for, at the end, that person who won to have been voted the winner. That said, again, we're human. And so we have our own hopes and dreams and interests related to our participation in the show. Within the game, certainly most of us, if not all, are really determined to win. And we're doing what we can. And we understand the game as best we're able, given our abilities. But the game takes a toll on many people, more so than most could prepare for. Producers know that. And in fact, they love it, because when the game starts to take its toll is when some of the most interesting footage and the most talked about interactions end up taking place. When the game is over, people return to lives from which they came looking for something on Survivor. Often they don't find in Survivor and in the experience afterward what they were looking for. If prior to the show and participation in it, you were prone to some kind of an addiction, alcoholism, drug abuse, etc., it's only inevitable, if not likely, if not at least likely, maybe inevitable, that you will be challenged with that addiction. And people have asked me, what do I think about the way in which the show distances itself? Those people behind the show distance themselves from some of the folks who've experienced public battles with addiction after having participated. I have a kind of, I think, balanced but rational reaction to that. First, from day one in the early episode when I caught people cheating on the game and shut the show down, I've watched egotistical persons in power abuse that power and abuse we participants. So I understand the lack of compassion, the absolute detachment from any concern about who we participants are as people, and the idea that all we are to them are pawns, pieces that fit into their money-making scheme of the moment. That's what we are to the people behind the scenes in this show. Again, a caveat. Don't let that undermine your love for the game, because the game itself is something happening among those human beings out there. And I encourage you to enjoy it. I try to, even with all I know about the behind the scenes. So, from the first season on, I've known that. And as the seasons have unfolded, more and more of the participants have faced different kinds of addiction, and their reactions to having fallen prey to those addictions are varying. Some tragic, some not really public, some a low-level kind of just continued battle that they faced most of their lives with the addiction. Whatever, they run the spectrum. All of that said about how detached the producers are and how unfair they are and unnecessarily they mistreat we participants, I have to support their decisions to prevent people with addictions from participating in the show once they've identified that those addictions are active or had become active after the show. For many, many, many reasons. Legally, I understand their decision from a liability perspective. Well, how could they let those people participate in that kind of a stressful environment without understanding how that addiction could result in behaviors that those folks who were not addicted to substances would never go to. Further, I think stressing further, encouraging the situations in which these folks who had addictions and have addictions find themselves even more stressed than they usually are in their lives, and possibly leading to even further stress when they leave this next opportunity, theoretical opportunity to participate in the game, likely not having won again would be irresponsible, even with psychological help. The people behind Survivor, CBS, producers, etc., would always tell you that there is a psychiatrist behind the show. And certainly there is. Does that psychiatrist do much? No. Is he or she able to healthily manage that number of people who are participants in their varied lives throughout the world? Absolutely not. But for legal reasons, rubber stamp, they have a psychiatrist behind the show who supposedly is available to the participants for a certain amount of time, and that covers their ass, basically. Great. It's all they can do. I understand that too. I understand, as someone who has a master's degree in education and counseling and a PhD almost completed in humanities. I get it. I know where we are with respect to how we treat or are not able to treat people. I know where we are with respect to our understanding of the human mind and the ways in which we can and can't manage what's going on there. So I don't have expectations that the show is perfectly responsible for keeping everyone healthy. They can't do that. And they've covered their ass by having psychiatrists behind the scenes. But again, I think it is appropriate of them to prevent people with addiction from continuing to pursue this goal and to be involved in this so public a game filled with such stresses on the show as it's airing, and even greater stresses for those struggling thereafter. The stresses thereafter are real. The producers behind the scenes detach in ways that are cold and often do damage to participants in ways that are calculated and dismissive. And none of those things do anything to support someone's challenges, particularly with respect to addiction. So I know there are some of you out there that were hoping I was going to say, gee, they really should be more all-inclusive. They really should represent all walks of life in a way that includes people with addiction. But I don't think it's reasonable to expect that those folk should be subjected to the same things people without addiction within the context of Survivor and all that happens thereafter. One thing I'd like to say with respect to those folks I don't think ought to be participating in Survivor. I don't think the producers ought to be exploiting as participants, and I don't think would be supported well afterward by the system or the lack thereof post-filming, is that there are ways in which you, if you happen to have been on Survivor and are addicted to something, can get help. There are ways in which you can move beyond what it is that the show did to you, what it is that you expected and were disappointed to learn wasn't a part of your journey. There are ways in which you can live happily, which I think is the goal in life. And personally, if you're one of the folks who was on Survivor, it's pretty easy to get in touch with me through the hundreds of people that I know who've participated in the show. And I invite you to do so. I don't have all the answers. I'm not pretending that I am Mr. Fix-It. But if you're looking for help and you're concerned about the ways in which this show has let you down, or that you feel let down by your experience in the show, and you have some need even just to share, I'm happy to listen. I likely know more than you think I do about what happened to you in your season and what's happened to so many of the participants, those with addictions and those without, and the harm that the ways in which you have been treated, likely, by the folks behind the show is. I understand that harm. I understand why it's harmful. And I understand the world in a way that I think might help you move past it a little bit. For me, reality matters. So none of what I would talk about with you would have to do with your beliefs or religion or those types of things. What I would focus on is what we would come to understand as what's true. That's how I define reality. And we'd have to think about whether we know what's true. And when we don't accept that, and when we do, use that which is true, reality, to ask ourselves how we'll move forward in ways that will support our being happy, our family being happy, our pathway forward being a joyful one. 80% of you who are listening to these videos have not subscribed to my channel. Please subscribe. Just hit the subscription button and hit the notification button, and you'll be informed when I have another video up for you to listen to. After you've subscribed, comment. Comment positively, comment negatively. No holds barred. Just say what you're thinking. That's what will make our exchange even more valuable. As I'm able, I'll create new videos responsive to that commentary. So like away, or dislike, on that rare occasion you may feel the need to do so. But either way, thank you.